That's Alice.
This episode's brought to you
That's
by
Alice.
Bit.
You left your fucking lighter, Alice.
Oh, hey, Alice, you left your fucking lighter. How's it going? We're here on the satellite, as per usual. I got Neif with me, and it's a very special day because you walked in when Connor's here.
What's up, Alice? How you doing?
You walked in at an excellent time. We were just talking about vinyl and dangerous amounts of LSD.
I was gonna say an acid, but
Yeah.
but you got there. Excuse me.
So, yeah, actually, I'm go on with your story if you don't mind.
Not at all. Okay, so when I was like, I think I was probably around 21, and I lived almost in West Hollywood, because Hollywood's split into a couple different parts, right? There's like Hollywood proper, which is not actually an incorporated city. There's West Hollywood, which is an incorporated city, right? Which is probably 3-4 miles from the center of Hollywood proper. And then there's North Hollywood, which is 10 or 15 miles away from actual Hollywood over the hill, right? So I knew this guy who had all kinds of fun chemicals, illicit and like weird research chemicals. And like the first time I did ketamine was with this cat. He was a little bit younger than me, but I digress. So a couple of my friends were like, hey, we'd like to take some acid. They'd never done it before. And I'm like, well, I've done it too many times probably. I know a guy we can get it from. And so I'll go get it. So I said to him I needed like 12 hits, I think. So there was 4 of us that were going to take it. And when I get to his house, he's wasted on, I don't know what. Could be a lot of things. Probably was a lot of things. And like the lights are dim. All the lights that are on are different colors. Some of them are changing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, good. So he's like, hey, man, here's your acid. He hands me this, like lunch bag, like a little plastic baggie. And it's got what looks like a bunch of hits in it. Some of them, he's clearly cut these when he's wasted.
Yeah.
So some of them are like this big, like 4.
Oh, so they weren't pleated. They were just shot.
He just,
Oh, yeah.
because he's, and like, again,
I'm
he's
guilty of like chopping it up into fucking
Right.
chunks.
And so homie's wasted. He's feeling good. He's like, hey, man, I have a present for you. I was like, oh, okay. So he goes in his freezer, pulls out like a little basket of different vials, finds the one labeled liquid LSD, and just sprays it into the bag and goes, have fun.
Oh.
Which was a fairly ominous thing to say with the rest of the story in mind, which is coming, right? So I'm like, cool, I'm in a rush because like we don't want to take it too late, so it's probably like 3 p.m. on a Tuesday or something, so I like rush back to my
Good
place.
time to dose.
Yeah, exactly. I like rush back to my place, and my friends are patiently waiting. So, but before I get there, I had squirreled away like the 4 hits that were like 4 hits apiece. Now, if we're just guessing with the liquid that he sprayed in there, let's call those 8 hits apiece, because there was definitely liquid in that fucking bag. And so I'd scroll those away because I didn't want my noob band members and my girl at the time
Smart.
being a hero,
Right.
right? So my dumbass decides that because I've taken at this point 100 different trips, from the time I was like 16 till I was like 19, I just took 2 of those big ones. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of between, I would say, 10 and 20 hits acid. At the time, I'm like selling a little bit of weed, so like I told people are over, and like an hour and a half goes by and nothing is happening. Like, regular shit, like 40 minutes, it'll start to be like, oh geez, I'm getting there. And so I wait another couple minutes, still nothing, and I'm like, maybe that shit was bunk, because I had got some stuff from him that he told me was like, hey, I'm not sure if this is gonna work. try this out. You know,
That's a mistake that I can say that I've made
Yes.
a few times in my life.
so then I ate the other two big ones.
Ooh.
Well, what felt like mere moments after I did that, the first 15 started to kick in. And this is when I've done one of the more memorable uh-ohs in my life.
Oh man.
Yeah, so there's like still weed customers at my house when it's like just starting to ebb on a little bit. I'm like, yo, everyone's got to get the fuck out of here right now. I go lay down in my bed. My girl comes and checks me. She's like blonde hair, and at this point, like her hair is doing like waterfall rainbows. The walls are like. That's probably around the time that the next bunch try to kick in. Well, after like an hour in bed, I start to hear some pretty terrible sounds. I come to find out that, you know, it's LA, right? It's Los Angeles. So it's my first or second year there. It's December, right around Christmas, which is hard to tell because where I'm from Philly. We're like, there's snow. There's no snow in Los Angeles. So it hadn't occurred to me that, oh shit, it's around Christmas time, and I think the Christmas parade is today. Let me rephrase that. I had no fucking idea there was a Christmas parade in LA. Someone had to finally tell me, my neighbor, who was a kooky guy, he was like an old burnout raver. Not a guy you really want to see when you're tripping. So he gets wind of the fact that we're on acid because I'm like outside, like thinking I'm just going nuts because I don't like Christmas music to start with. Now I'm hearing roughly 100 high school students warm up their wind instruments with out-of-tune Christmas music.
Nice.
Oh, so this is high school.
It's part of the
Students,
parade. It's part of the
playing
parade that I'm finding out.
Christmas music.
That I'm finding out on a shitload of acid
On a
actually comes
head
down
full
our
of
street.
acid.
Well, our house was behind a fourplex on the same property, so like we were kind of in the middle of like 3 different roads, one of which the parade literally goes down. So I'm starting to see helicopters, and like my neighbor is a kook, and I'm just thinking, this guy is trying to kill me because he's fucking with me because he knows I'm on acid, and he's fucking with us because he knows we're tripping, and I'm just thinking like, this guy's gonna kill us. This guy is going to kill. What a perfect day to fucking kill a bunch of people when the cops are all distracted. There's a ton of noise.
Oh, it makes perfect sense actually.
That's what I'm saying. He started a fire in the fire pit in the courtyard just to be a dick, you know?
Yeah.
So I think I'm losing my mind because I'm hearing out-of-tune Christmas music, like a bunch of different songs, all playing at the same time on out-of-tune high school instruments. I'm just like, well, this is my life now. I guess this is just how it's going to go. I'm just going to hear out-of-tune Christmas music. My neighbor's trying to kill me. So this is a couple hours that I'm, condensing here. Eventually, one of the guys that was supposed to take this with us, which we didn't wait for, and he was pissed because he ran into some stuff. He was from like 2 hours away. His mom got us a bunch of groceries. So on a head full of acid, I have to pretend that I'm not on acid and unload like $300 of Costco stuff. All the while he knows I'm on acid that I was supposed to wait for him to take. So he's fucking pissed off. His mom knows something is going on. I have not stopped coming up or tripping harder. It just keeps getting worse, Then we start seeing Clydesdale horses. We understand now that there's a parade like literally going by our house. I think the world is definitely coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I'm supposed to be like effectively babysitting 3 people who have never taken acid before. And I'm absolutely losing my goddamn mind every moment anew,
Well, I guess you have no idea. I was gonna ask how they were doing, but you have no clue.
Oh, dude, they were freaking out too because like this was like some reasonably good shit.
Well, yeah,
I guess.
if you've never eaten before and your guide is like, "Oh, I got it. I'm good, y'all," and then this is the end of the world, y'all. This is it. You're like, this is the first time I'm eating acid. What do you mean? Yeah,
Maybe
I know.
he's right.
It was
Maybe this
a
is the end of
horrible
the world.
fucking timing, dude. Because this is it. We're done.
Because this is it. We're done. This guy's trying to kill us. The cops aren't going to come because they're tied up at the parade. There's Clydesdale horses everywhere. There's cops have blocked off my street. There's helicopters. Like, I'm thinking the world is definitely coming to an end right at this moment. There's out-of-tune Christmas music. I mean, it's literally my fucking nightmare unfolding in front of me while I'm also just like, I wouldn't have liked this had I been sober. I'd be like, oh, man, with the fucking noise and the cops and the Christmas music, like, that's a bad day for me.
Those all sound like that's all awful.
That's a bad day for me if one of those things is around.
Right.
Much less all 3 of them happening at the same time while I'm also on the most acid I've ever seen anyone eat.
Right.
That's what hell is.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so eventually, again, I'm still just like absolutely tripping face at like 11 or midnight. And I decide to finally wrestle my phone away from my singer at the time, who's only on like 1 or 2 hits acid, who's doing his best while he's tripping for the first time to make sure that I don't run out naked in traffic. You know what I mean? Go tell one of those cops that I need help. You know, like,
Yeah.
he's just trying to stop me from doing something really stupid. He's hidden my phone somewhere because I'm insisting that I need to call my mom and dad, who are some of my best friends. I love my mom and dad. They're amazing, amazing, brilliant people, right? I am insisting I gotta call them and make sure that this is not happening there as well. Which I managed to do at some point. Which would, if it's 11 in California, that would make it 2 a.m. on the East Coast. We've already established that it's probably a weekday because didn't have a job at the time. I was going to music school, you know. So I've called my parents at 2 a.m. asking them, hello, is the world also ending where you are? Which they were not stoked about. Probably like 16 or 17 hours in, I snap out of it.
Okay.
Like I'm still like high.
Uh-huh.
But I'm back to like being
right.
kind of a human being again.
Mm.
And so one of the first things I managed to like actually get out with any articulation was like, hey, none of that stuff really happened, right? Like none of that. I was just tripping. They're like, fuck you. All of that stuff happened. You goddamn asshole. You know? Fuck you for putting us through that. And I'm like, oh.
It did happen.
I called I think I called. I was like, hey, Ma. I'm back. She's like, it'll be okay. I'm like, no. I'm okay now. Sorry about that. I was buffering apparently. Now I've loaded and I'm boy, am I sorry about that. That was a bummer, huh? They still to this day, that was 10 or 11 years ago. They still to this day give me a good-natured hard time about it, even though they probably should be a lot more pissed off than they are. But hey, you know, they're also fairly proud of me. I've turned my life around in many ways, and so I think they try and keep that in mind with dumb fucking bullshit like that.
What did you grow up listening to around the house?
Oh, okay. So actually, this memory I like talking about. It's my first memory that is within my grasp. You know, I think I was 3 years old, dancing around to "Looking Out My Back Door" by Creedence with my dad. Yeah, that's my first memory. My dad's a musician as well. He's a killer guitar player. And so I grew up around music, although it was never really forced upon me in any meaningful way. You know, one day when I was 12 or 13, I was having a conversation with my buddy I was telling you about that passed away, my first musical partner outside of my father. You know, and he was like, hey man, we should start a band. We just figured out that Nirvana was a thing. And I'm like, okay, great. So I go to my dad, and is after seeing him play the electric guitar in front of me for the first time that I was like old enough to appreciate what was going on.
Yeah.
You know? And a couple weeks after that, I went to him and I was like, I think I want to play music. And he could not have been more excited. The words that came out of my mouth, he had been waiting for forever and was going to be fine if they never came. But, you know, he loves music, grew up around it. He holds a theory that music is the voice of God or evidence that God exists to him, right? And so when I told him I want to play music, he did a little jump. You know, he was stoked. The next day, a couple days later, I was like homesick from school. I've had stomach problems much of my life, you know, from when I was a baby. And I didn't feel very well. And he came home with like, a bass for me. It was a Squire. He was like, hey, look, this thing probably sucks a little bit. If you practice, you know, we'll talk about getting you a real instrument, which is pretty cool. Definitely made my sick day a little better. And he picked out a couple little, like, some of his favorite bass lines that he thought, you know, this would be reasonably easy to play, which was the bass line from The Chain from Fleetwood Mac, right? And Walked on One by The Ventures. And he was like, all right, if you can learn one of these after I show you a couple times, I have chili. My dad's quite a cook. he bribed me with chili, which was downstairs, and he was like, when you can play it, you can come eat.
You eat when you play.
Look, in a not fucked up way, yeah. I mean, it was that he was trying to incentivize.
I'm gonna
me,
have to try that around here.
Well, he was trying to incentivize me, and like my whole family likes food, so it was pretty good incentive, and I
How was the chili?
I'm sure it was dope. I don't remember the chili. I do remember getting the baseline down enough that I was able to eat. I remember that it was chili because a seminal moment in my life, right?
It's chili's, not Lunchables.
Exactly right.
Hell yeah.
Right. So man, growing up, I had a funny moment with my dad a year or two ago where I had on some song off the first Gorillaz record. He was kind of like, "What the fuck is this?" And I was like, "The first record you ever let me buy." And he was like, "Because it's not his thing." And he was like, "Look, my parents are old hippies that had to get real jobs. You know what I mean?" So he was a mixture of like, that sucks, and then also like, but you can do whatever you want. I'm not here to tell you what art you can consume or can't consume as long as it's not going to actively make you stupider,
Right.
So I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock. I was in Allman Brothers cover band with my dad.
Nice.
Growing up, Allman Brothers, Skinner kind of stuff. Yeah.
Allman Brothers are a very they fall into the classic Southern rock category.
Yeah, well, they invented it, right?
Well, yeah, but the thing about the Allman Brothers to me is that one thing that doing that they get overlooked as how technically and musically knowledgeable and talented.
And they were hip.
Yeah, I mean they were very
jazz cats.
Exactly. I was going to say it's much like Santana, the Santana band.
Yeah,
and not what a lot of people nowadays know about Santana, which is his later stuff. It's not bad. It's just more pop. But the early stuff, the first couple albums, the Santana band was truly just a jazz band.
Oh man, that's what there was at the time.
Right.
Look, and this spans probably at this point 2 or 3 generations, but my dad points out often that his generation of folks, the last generation of folks to kind of listen to music made by professional musicians, not folk artists. Like you name a big band from the last 30, 40, 50 years, those are folk artists. Those are not those are not dudes who were classically trained their whole life to write musicals and symphony. I mean, like, now that also doesn't take away from the talent of some of the folks. Like I hold the opinion that like Josh Homme would be like the Beethoven of our time. He's a fucking musical genius, right? Even if you don't care for his art.
No, I'm a big fan.
Fucking
well, I mean, present company exclusive. I mean the general you.
Yeah.
Alice, the general.
Yeah, the general you.
But I understand where a lot of people. I mean, that's a good example of Queens of Stone Age is that they can be thrown into a stoner rock category real easily, and that's fine. But if you really listen to what they're doing, it's so dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's so pushing the realms of music in general, not just rock music or metal or this or that. And that's really what jazz is all about. Jazz is the only music that jazz recognizes because it's all jazz to jazz.
Well, I mean, and A, very well said. B, something that I touched on earlier before Alice walked in. Is that my closest friends and business partners of both a long time and a short time, depending on who we're talking about, look at music differently than I do because of my upbringing, because of my heritage, which I can pontificate about later if you so choose. Melody is the only thing I really care about. All the other stuff, I just really can't be bothered with.
And let's talk about that because you are a musician.
Yes,
and you are in multiple bands, multiple projects, multiple things coming out. Carbon Vulture, you front and play bass.
Is my baby, yeah.
And your second EP, Death by Comfort, came out a couple months ago.
Yes, sir.
I know you don't want to get into it too much about specifics, but you have other things coming up as well.
I do.
To be excited about.
Yeah, yes.
With both your projects, Shedonist, you play lead guitar.
I do, which is actually what I went to school to do. Even though I play bass and sing in my own band, those are new for me.
Yeah, well, that's very cool. Why I guess that's really interesting. Why did you decide to do that? I mean, don't get me wrong. Will fucking is a fucking.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of it. And so me and Will have been playing music together for 13 years now, right? And in our last band, which I kind of started, we both did like shreddy dual guitar stuff, you know, and in and out of that band in the 8 years that we were in it together, man, I think our loose tally was like 30 different people kind of in and out around us. And when Panic in Eden, which was our last band, Panic in Eden, I always pick things that are like kind of difficult to say. Say Karma Vulture when you're really baked. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, you know. Panic in Eden. Try saying Panic. Before I quit drinking, I was a world class drunk, you know. So try saying Panic in Eden when you're drunk. Oh, it is not a fun time. It really is not. But that band had 5 people. You know, I didn't sing. I just played guitar. And when the last iteration of that band just fucked off, Will and I are like, well, look, we said there's 2 kinds of musicians, right? There's tourists, you know, folks that are some of the most talented folks I've ever met in my life. But that also falls in the category of like, hey, look, music may always been something that just happens for them. Didn't have to work out a lot. And when they get into the nitty gritty and they figure out like, wait, this is a lot of work. And you can do everything right and no one is probably going to give a shit. You know what I mean? They're like, fuck this, I can go teach in Bumblefuck, Ohio, or wherever they're from, and they go do that, right? Well, for Will and I, it's like, it's compulsive. Even if I always do this for free, I'm always going to do it until physically I probably can't.
It's nice that other people enjoy it. That's always a good feeling, but it's not for them, it's for you.
At
least I should speak for myself. That's how I treat my art, and that's how it is for me. It's a release for me,
right.
And that the fact that other people like watching me masturbate sometimes that's a good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I would do it even if no one was paying attention. You know, and I think that's kind of what
exactly right.
Yeah,
man, exactly right. And I just so these cats. Dude, this will come around to your point, I promise. So people fucked off. Somebody literally left a bass in our rehearsal studio. I didn't own a bass at the time, and the 2 guitars and a drummer. Our drummer at the time stuck around. You know, and we're like, well, let's just fuck the old band. We've been trying to do that for 8 years. No one gives a shit. We had money behind us. The whole thing. It just didn't. We did all the right stuff, and it didn't work out. So, fuck that. Let's just start a new band and do whatever we want. And if no one gives a shit, then no one gives a shit. And so I was fucking around with the bass. I love playing bass. And Will, in a moment of, I'm sure, both selfishness and confidence, because he, in his own way, has had the most confidence in me of anybody ever, which is interesting because we haven't always, 13 years, known each other through a lot of stages of our life. We haven't always gone along every moment of it, But he stuck around. He's always encouraged me, and I just wanted to sing, and he's like, nah, man, you should play bass too. I'm like, yeah, but singing and playing bass is hard, and I don't know how to sing at all, and I really don't know how to play the bass. And he's like, you're good, man, you'll figure it out. And that was the end of that conversation. He was right. Well, and thank you. Yeah. But because, part of it too with Karma, unlike a lot of bass players, now some as the years go on, I have a big old board with a bunch of pedals on it. Because I wasn't that good at the bass, I had to find, and I was used to being very good at the guitar, I had to find a new way to cover up for the fact I wasn't very good at the bass.
It is a different world. It is an absolute different world.
Yeah.
I've played guitar, 6-string guitar itself, or 12-string is actually what I learned on, for 30 years now. And I've picked up the bass all that time, but I wouldn't say that I really became a bass player until at least 15 years into that.
Yeah.
And that was sitting down to do studio work and session work, and learning that it wasn't just about knowing where I was playing, like on lead.
Yeah.
It was about learning how to play bass.
And how to interact with the other musicians, right. Maybe more so or in a different way than you would with guitar.
Right. Exactly.
Well, if you recall, tying this back to me telling my dad I wanted to play music, he got me a bass. My first instrument was bass.
Yeah.
But I did that about as seriously as any 12-year-old does anything.
Yeah.
So I ended up starting to play guitar when I was 15. I got good at that quickly, and then
Yeah.
we were off to the races. The sickness was in me.
Do you have any ghost stories?
Ghost stories, yes, actually, and maybe not in so many words, but yeah, effectively.
Sure. Like I sometimes I like to clarify and say like something you can't really define with logic, like just something outside of your reasoning, I suppose.
So the house I grew up in, um, there were these two Victorian style houses where I grew up in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, and one of them was a lot newer and a little bit smaller and on half the amount of lot. My parents were doing well, and so they bought the place next door, which was a dump of a rental property, but was 250 or 300 years old. Big old house, had an addition, put in a pool, did the whole property value thing right. But with that said, I mean, this house was 250 years old. The walls are 3 feet of stone, and it's right across the street from a big park and a couple square miles of woods, and it's got a estate where George Washington stopped to rest with all the troops on his way to Valley Forge, right? So some of the stuff around there is old. Philadelphia's northern part of our country. We're right by the spot where
like a military camp park.
Well, at the
I
time
see some of they would set up parks around a spot that was a camp and travel.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there was a big old estate there, a big old mansion.
Right.
Where George Washington, he slept there. I'm sure.
Oh, no, the estate was actually there.
Yes.
When they stopped. Okay,
yes.
So that's even creepier on its own level.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Right.
And my house is roughly 1,000 yards from the door of that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Maybe not even. Maybe a little bit more.
Right.
It's through the woods, so like as the crow flies.
Right.
It's hard to say. What can I say about that? Point being, our house is old. Especially at night in the oldest part of the house, you just would get fucking real skin crawly vibes going up our front steps. Right at the top of the steps too, just like you feel gross.
Yeah.
Hair raising even to this day to think about. But not something that I would really get into, really objectively believe in per se. Not something I talked about. Well, my little brother and I, like a couple of years ago, at this point we're both adults, he's about to have a kid, he's got a scary job. Offhand, I mentioned like, creepy vibes at the top of the steps. He's like, what the fuck did you just say? And I was like, man, yeah, I used to always get like real creepy kind of. He's like, dude, I've never talked to anybody about this, but me too. I hate that. He's like, where your skin crawls and you just feel like, and I'm like, dude, get the fuck out.
It's funny how people don't talk about it too. It's really,
because it's not exactly taboo, but it's the people that are really into it, man.
I think
can be a little.
There might be something to be said about the experience that people don't naturally talk about it, even when it happens.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of taboo, or maybe it's something.
You could also be questioning. A lot of people could be questioning whether or not it's just them, and they're like,
exactly.
I don't want to say that's what it was. I mean, I worked at a place. Yeah, I mean, I worked at a place as a projectionist. And, there was all kind of lore about the place. The place had been there for years. It wasn't an old theater, but it had been there a long time. And even before I had heard anything about the place, I think when I was telling somebody, man, I get a weird vibe, when as I'm walking through the hallways up there, every now and again it feels like cold passes through me and it just gives me this weird vibe. And I think from that, when somebody started telling me, a dude died or something like that. So it's one of those things where you never know if somebody is putting you on because of it, or if you're even going to bring it up because it might just be some weird vibe you're feeling, and they're like, I don't know,
Well, I think the important thing is like just not overstating ourselves, because none of us know anything about what's going on, but we've all had strange experiences. I don't think that it devalues them at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like the fact that we don't know exactly what it is, that it might be a hallucination, that shouldn't detract from us talking about it, because we don't really even know what a hallucination is. That could be for all we know, you could be looking at reality more objectively.
Exactly.
I've certainly felt that way on high doses of mushrooms where I had more visual acuity. Like I could see better and more, like, further out, you know, more detail.
Well, like, I think that's why some of those experiences are hard to talk about, hard to exactly articulate and place words for it. And then, you know, I think a lot of things for folks who like put a lot of value into the way that reality is set up for them and for us most of the time. You know, I think that's hard to potentially look at that and say, well, maybe that's at least slightly bullshit. Maybe reality, maybe there's a lot more reality than we can evolutionarily perceive, you know what I mean? Because like it just doesn't serve us as animals that need to protect ourselves from the elements and other animals until a short while ago when we have all this and we have Alice, and you know that's where we're animals, right? And so maybe there's a lot more reality that we just it doesn't serve any purpose in our day-to-day existence, which is really to procreate.
That sounds a lot like what I've mentioned with the burning out of our instincts because they're unnecessary. We've created all these things.
Well, we're chemically inundated.
Yeah. Well, like you take antacid, then you get acid reflux all the time. You take aspirin, you get headaches more often. You know, we built ourselves into these things so we don't need to go run elk down with spears. So, you know,
because you know, down
our
to
perceptions also. We don't need the same perceptions that the animals have.
Well, down to the lowest levels of life, you want to expend as little energy as possible. So if you're telling your body, you don't need to worry about this thing because I can just fix it, even if temporarily, to some extent it stops worrying about that shit. You know, hey, look, don't use it, you'll lose it. That is true with some things. It just is. Certainly, as far as the chemical balance, the delicate chemical balance that we have.
Sounds like tundra law.
So, what did anything else happen with the house? Or like, and this you were describing this was the like front porch as you're going into that.
Not house, even front porch, like the steps, what you might call the foyer.
Right.
You know, so you walk in up the porch, which was clearly newer, meaning less than 100-year-old concrete that somebody made a porch. You know what I mean? Right.
Some stuff is last in the house.
Well, exactly right. You know, so you walk in the front door. And the front door itself is, you know, 2.5 inch thick, like real wood. It's probably 600 pounds. My mom took off the door knocker, and that was dated 1812. You know, the house was old, right? And so you walk in the front door, immediately there's a temperature change because there's 3 feet of stone, right? And off to your left would be like dining room area, like formal dining room area, living room area. And then in between those two rooms were like the front steps up to the bedroom part of the house.
Right.
And up at the landing and up those steps, like, dude, I ran up those steps every time I climbed them. I just did not want to be in that little spot, that little space. It was an uncomfortable space, physically, emotionally. It's just weird fucking vibes, to put it colloquially, in the parlance of our times.
You were beyond whistling past the graveyard. You just ran.
I just didn't fuck with it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It just wasn't really my trip. You know, I think with artists too, you know, maybe you let in more of the reality that may well be there all the time that other folks just don't perceive. And so you feel stuff. When I was a kid, I didn't used to like slamming things because I felt like I could like.
Right.
On that, I have something to show you, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just like doors, whatever it was. I'm just like, now you can like, this thing doesn't enjoy that, so to speak.
Right.
Which is silly. That house, I don't have any other ghost stories. That house that I took that acid in, that house had weird vibes too. Somebody had hung themselves in there. It was one of the older houses in the neighborhood. It was 70 years old, which for California is old. You know, my bedroom door used to open every night at like 12:42 or something fucking weird.
Right.
To the point that I put a lock on it so it wouldn't do that shit.
Okay.
Because it didn't quite close, you know what I mean? Like every day at the same time it would open. Right. You're like, fuck
it's
you.
It's not a house settling thing.
So you're describing like artists.
Yeah.
I think maybe this is what happens when we make art.
Well said.
Or maybe something akin to that. It's a famous Alex Gray painting that Alice has heard me talk about before. But yeah, it's like he's receiving this from here, and making art.
Well, man, okay, you're a physical medium artist. Did we talk about this? Am I
I'm a poet and I write fantasy novels.
awesome?
I write I make sigils as well, but it's part of like it goes with the poems that I write.
That's right. Okay, I have looked at this page. I like all of this, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
B, man, look, making a record as a musician, sometimes when it's done, especially if it's your music, listening to it is a really strange phenomenon. A, because like you've listened to it so many times, right?
Mm.
B, because like there's always this part of me that is like, okay, I remember writing that song. I remember jamming it out. I remember coming up with the parts. I remember when Will came up with the parts, this part, and then we did whatever the case is. I was definitely there for all of that. And yet, a part of me feels like this is not all of mine. Like, and that's my favorite part about music too, is like making records. You just had something that started here, and now I can hand it to you and be like, hey, check it out.
Right.
That's an indescribable feeling that has made my life cumulatively up to this point worth it. I mean, I got a bunch of cool music out or coming out, and fuck, if nothing else ever happens, like, I'll make a bunch of cool records.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the art of being a musician, where at one time all we could do is chart it as music and publish it that way. Now we have a recording medium, much like painters were photographers before photography.
Yeah, sure.
And it's its own different thing now. I always look at recording a record as its own thing, as opposed to playing live.
Yeah, sure.
Hendrix was really big on the idea. If you want to hear the record, go home and listen to it.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a meaning to all of this?
I mean, look, I would say to some extent there absolutely has to be, and there definitely is not.
Fair enough. I see what you mean. I agree.
Well, and like, I guess what I mean is like, if humans are, for lack of a better phrase, because I'm a little bit stoned, so please excuse me. Humans are designed.
I'm more than a little bit stoned.
Okay, great. Hey, so then we're on the same page. Humans are designed, and I don't mean designed, I just mean colloquially, like, like you might design a fucking computer. Humans were designed around the idea of whether it was this way when we're having to kill things every day to survive, or whether it's now, there's no to me, there's no such thing as happiness. There is achievement and
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like there has to be a meaning, because you have to create your own fucking meaning.
It's
Also, there's definitely not, because no one's gonna fucking tell you what to live about. You have to decide that, and you have to go after it. Like nothing else fucking matters.
I've often had to explain on the note of happiness, often to children, that happiness isn't a state of being.
You don't find it. You make it so.
Happiness comes in moments, just like pain.
Yeah.
I think there certainly can be meaning if you let it, if you let there be, but not necessarily.
And so it's the same thing, if you put meaning on it, it's there. If you don't, then
exactly right. And to bring that to Karma Vulture and some of the way that we kind of go about making music is just like, like you touched on with Queens of Stone Age, right? Like, not that I'm.
Speaking of Queens of the Stone Age,
that, right.
You're doing a thing at Exit Inn.
Yes.
August 28th. That's a Sunday.
Come. Yeah.
Sunday. You should come, and I'll know if you're not there, because I'll be there, and I'll beat you up.
So we're doing this Queens of Stone Age cover thing at the Exit Inn, which being new to Nashville, I've been told that that's like not a deal. That's it's a cool thing, playing at the Exit Inn. Like, it's a pretty big venue. Like,
oh yeah, it's
I don't want to throw a show there because it would look empty, kind of thing. Right? Even if I brought 100 people, like, it's still gonna be like, oh man, there's a lot of room in here.
Yeah.
It's a big room.
Yeah. So like, we're stoked to play there. It's through Bad Ash Booking. Shout out to Corey. Thanks for letting us on. And we submitted. He has to submit like 5 songs, I think, which we definitely did. And we threw two of the 3 songs we threw on there. We're like, okay, these are not deep cuts. They're some of our favorite tunes, and there's no fucking way they're gonna give it to us. But let's try. So we got Burn the Witch and
Wow.
Smooth Sailing.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Burn the Witch is one of my favorites.
And I got to sing and play the bass, which is going to be super fucking annoying. To put it, to not to put too fine a point.
I've heard you hit them highs. So.
That's very exciting, and it sounds good in there. So that's gonna be great.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see that.
We're really stoked about it. They're one of our favorite bands, and part of what I like about them is it's very melodic music, right?
Oh yeah.
My problem with a lot of the genre that we've been dubbed with, pigeonholed, knighted with, what the fuck ever, would be like stoner rock and like doom, stoner doom kind of stuff, doom metal, stoner metal.
Speaking of doom, and before you get into it anymore,
my dude over here,
July 15th, London, Kentucky, Holler of Doom.
We're playing Holler Doom.
Shedonist, right?
No, that's Karma.
Karma Vulture?
That's Karma.
Oh, okay, hell yeah. Right
we
on.
Picked that up last minute. Shout out to the band that booked us. You guys were dealing with Willie. I'm so sorry. But come to Holler Doom. It's going to be fun. It's like 2 hours from here. Here being, Alice Land.
But you were saying?
Right. Very melodic Queens of Stone Age. As I touched on earlier, melody is really something that it's the only thing I care about with music is the melodic. And, my trip with, like, I don't really listen to the genre that Conor Vulture probably is. It's not my thing. People have been like, in LA, I got a couple people recognize me around town. They're like, "Oh, you're in a metal band," and I was like, "Oh no, it's not. It's not me. No." Right. They're like, "Yeah, Karma something." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that is me." Oh, you know that? Yeah, that is me. We've been featured in like some pretty decent sized metal publications. So like, what the fuck do I know? You know what I mean? But not exactly my cup of tea. I think a lot of it is fairly gratuitous in its approach. It's just like, which like, hey, go for it, please do.
Yeah.
We try to attack it with slightly more subtle
very
approach.
Good at what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I enjoy the sound.
Hey, man, thank you. Look, and it begs the question: why would I do something that isn't exactly my cup of tea?
Because you're
fun.
Also really fucking good at it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun and like building the tone, and then like as we touched on earlier, why would I play bass? Well, he fit what we were going for. He's an interesting guitar player. I was stuck in a little bit of a rut. I wanted new musical things. I've always wanted to sing. I'd never been a lead singer before Conor Vulture. Right. I had one song that I recorded that was on a record where I sang. You know what I mean? So like, now I'm obsessed, which is fun. I sing hours every single day. But so problem with a lot of the bands in our genre, from a listener perspective, someone who doesn't listen to super heavy music, a lot of it doesn't seem like there was the same kind of thought that I would put into it, right? It's very long parts. There's no transcendent aspect of it. If you dig that kind of thing, yeah, you dig it. My lady loves that kind of stuff, and like she puts on an hour-long droney thing to study, and that's her trip. She loves that, right? So we try to attack it from like, well, I'm a songwriter, right? So why can't we take these cool tones that we love, like from Queens and Soundgarden and a lot of these stoner rock bands? Why can't we then also have pop songs where I sing? I'm not going to scream, And
that's really interesting way that you sum that up, because a lot of times I won't hear a band be able to, or anybody out of their own band be able to wrap it around like that.
Yeah,
because I can hear exactly what you're saying.
It's like
I can hear exactly what you're saying, because it is tonally, what y'all are doing has much more of a pop sensibility.
On purpose.
But tonally, I'm hearing things like Clutch.
Yeah.
What y'all do.
I couldn't tell you one tune from, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
and honestly, I'm only really a fan of Clutch's older, real heavy stuff.
I fucking love Clutch, and I agree. Like I see the crossover there.
But
like
it's like
you don't know Clutch, but
they fall under stoner rock.
Yeah, man, yeah. I know who Clutch is. Yeah. I just again, I don't, dude. On any given time,
no, I'm with you.
You'll find me listening to like Al Green or Chris Stapleton or on the way over here. I think in my shuffle, 2 Lake Street Dive songs came on from their first big record. Like I really like singers. I like disgustingly talented fucking people, whether that's from a songwriting perspective.
Me too.
And
it's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, please.
I was just
I'm
gonna
check it
say,
out.
you know, like, and we're really lucky that we have that we know so many talented people and have so many talented friends around us.
Yeah, blows my mind anew all the time.
Yeah, and like that's not to say that there aren't talented people in other places, but you know, it's something about not only is this place, you know, known for being a music hub for people, but it's also a very very strange place. It's built on top of a ancient burial ground.
Did not know that.
Nashville is geographically, from what I understand, a negative energy basin.
Interesting.
The natives here only buried and hunted.
Huh.
They pretty much didn't live on the plateau, right at the edge of the plateau, the Cumberland Plateau here. It's just, you know, when you look at the local history, it is very bloody with Civil War.
Yeah, sure.
One of probably the bloodiest state in the Civil War.
I'm from another one of them,
right.
being Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can go to a park here that's a fort, that was a Union fort, and stand in that park and look at another park, and that's a Confederate fort. And that's literally how close these places were, and that's how crazy it was here. And that's just how much death and violence and all that kind of thing went on here. But it's not, you know, it's one of those kind of, you know, that's the bad side of things. And I've always said that it's hard to get out of Nashville. It's really hard to get out.
That's yeah, you're not the only person I've heard say that.
And it'll hold you. It's not a bad place to be if you know how to ride with it. But, you know, like Alex is saying, or I guess the reciprocal of that, or he's saying, not to say there's not talent in other places, and also not to say there's not talent here, but it is really good to have people like yourself and some of the people around you coming from other places, bringing more of these other places here as far as the art and the music and the style and the business in which y'all operate.
Yeah,
because LA.
It's fucking savage, dude.
Yeah, it's a completely another. And I've had to have that discussion with a lot of artists working with them and producing and developing here about, you know, New York, Nashville, LA are three different animals.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend I know too much about it, but the environment just doesn't seem friendly to art in a lot of ways.
Man, well, that depends how you want to look at it, right? I mean, to me, and I feel like in my own life I've broken this notion, but it's one that a lot of folks hold, and that one that I don't not hold. You know, pain and misery and bad experience and hard experience, even if it's not bad in the long run, creates good art. It just does. You know, some of the best art ever penned, drawn, painted, written, sculpted. I mean, dude, just comes from.
What's that saying? Good
hard men make hard times make hard men. Hard men make easy times make weak men make hard times.
Yeah,
in the cycle.
And that's with art too.
Yes.
Soft times make shitty art that's censored and generic, and then like difficult times push the boundary. I forget, it was Andrew Schultz. He's a stand-up comedian. Was just talking about how, I was watching his podcast, and he was talking about how this is a very it's a perfect time to be a comedian because it's dangerous to do comedy right
Joe
now.
Rogan's been saying that for quite a while.
It's
and
like,
maybe he got that from Andrew Schultz. You know?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, he very easily could be a Rogan quote too. I don't think he was. He might have even said that, but that
might be Dave Chappelle too. I don't remember.
You know what? I wonder if that's where I saw it, actually. Yeah. That might be who I'm thinking of.
I'm distracting you, and my apologies.
Oh, no, you're good. But yeah, it just rings true because I think that's true of any art. You know, comedy seems to be at the forefront of it right now. Thing that's... Because something being funny and like being a joke seems to be the thing exactly in question, right? Because then you look at hip-hop music, and it's like promoting... ideals that you wouldn't legally be allowed to do. in a multitude of ways.
Right.
And that seems to be fine with people. I mean, hip hop's primarily what I listen to a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate the freedom for people to be able to say whatever the fuck they want.
Absolutely. I mean, it's important.
But I think, all art is under attack right now, and that thing about hard times, I think good art rises out of that.
Well, a conversation I had with the drummer in both my bands, Ben, who also produces both my band's records, along with the help of our amazingly talented, my now roommate and another one of the producers on our label, Josh Martinez, who's a freak, both from a performer standpoint and from a production standpoint. I mean, he's just a freak.
Happy birthday, Josh.
Yeah, happy birthday, Josh.
Alice, so that's an inside joke Alice isn't going to get, but that's okay.
Ben is one of the better musicians that I've really had the pleasure of certainly being around or meeting, right? And it's one of those things where, like, I've just spent a lot of time with the man during lockdown. Like, I worked on a bunch of his solo stuff with him. We spent a bunch of time together just making music with Vulture, with whatever. Point being, Ben, right before we kind of decided that we should get the fuck out of LA and go anywhere else, Ben was like, man, his band was, right before lockdowns, we were doing some big shows that they were nice enough to get us on and stuff, because he's also in my band. His band was starting to get a little bit of success, like legitimate. Going to start touring with big bands, getting label interest.
Shout out to Absurd.
Yeah, shout out to the Absurd. And all that just went away. And so Ben's writing songs, at first begrudgingly being helped by me because I'm just like depressed. And he's like, hey man, I didn't know you were like that good at guitar. You want to come play on some stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. Get the fuck out of bed, come play music. I'm like, fine. We've been locked up for 3 months. I don't have any money, Ben's a really talented cat. And he was at some point just like, man, all this stuff I just worked for went away. Like, do I really want to keep doing this? I'm like, look, man, to go back to that point, finally, excuse me.
It's the rhetoric rabbit hole. We go down rabbit hole. Rhetoric rabbit holes.
Then I'm your guy. Ben was like, do I really want to do this? And I'm sitting there going like, okay, man, I'm like pretty good at music. I'm not intimidated by anybody, really. I'll get on stage with anybody. They might make me look like a fool every now and again. But I'm not intimidated by it. I'll get up there. I'm confident in my abilities. This guy is talented at things that I'm not talented at and would like to be talented at. You know what I mean? And stuff that I am pretty good at, he's also pretty good at. And so I'm sitting there going like, well, yo, things are about to get pretty bad. And I don't know about you, but when things get bad, I think most people like comforting or challenging art, and especially music. At least in my reality, that's been true.
That reminds me of another quote I really like. Art it comforts the disturbed, and it disturbs the comfortable.
I love that. I've not heard that. I love that. My point to him was like, hey man, people are gonna need music. I don't know about you. I'd like to make some of it. And he was kind of like, well, fuck. Like, yeah, I guess when you put it that way. And I'm like, man, you're like real good, dude. Like, yo, I'm definitely gonna keep doing it. Yeah. I'm gonna feel a little silly if you stop. Right. Here we are.
It's like I struggle to find anything more important to do. Except like maybe being a parent and like raising children, but I don't really want to do that. So like I'm gonna make art instead.
I do.
It definitely changes the
equation.
The equation, absolutely. That's kind of like you're saying when hard times. I mean, I was churning out songs left and right for money in my 20s, and but I was in rock and roll or running a club, living in a club. Girlfriend throwing me in and out of a house situation. So I had plenty to write about. You have a kid, you settle down. You start producing because you don't got so much to write about.
Well, it's like a lot of bands' third records suck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the first two got them laid.
Yeah. Well, the first one was like,
or even worse,
starving.
It took away the need to express yourself in the manner that they've always done so. The first record may have been a lifetime of work. The second one is probably still the other half of that lifetime work didn't make it on the first fucking record. The other half, hopefully, you're still inspired by the new way your life is going. Well, let's say the third record, if you're a successful band, you got some money. You don't have to fucking write about anything. Yeah. What do you have to worry about? Oh, no, I get too many blowjobs. I eat too much delicious food. I have too much money. I don't know what to do with it. I have too many nice drugs. Yeah. Who wants to listen to that fucking song,
The bands would hanging with each other, and they start doing the Beatles thing where they show up, they meet for lunch at the nice restaurant, and then just go do their parts.
It is, that's a super interesting point, Connor, because it's kind of like, I feel like music itself has shifted that way too, where it's like, you look at 80s, 90s hip hop, it's like, nothing's glorified. It's like, this is what I come from. It fucking sucks. Here's what I do to survive it or how I got out of it.
Yeah.
Now it's like, it's a flex, right? Yeah. It's like, this is what I do. I fucking love it. I'm great. Everyone should be just like me.
I got so much money.
I think no one should be like
I'm so hammered all the time that I can't, function.
No, but no, I was just going to say, like, I feel like that's the same progression between, like, the first album and the third album. Is like... the
genres of a music genre is kind of, I could see that too. All of them kind of do that.
Yeah.
Punk did that.
Well, that's why the great bands are the great bands. Like, let's say, Josh Homme, like we've been talking about. Yeah. Some folks don't like that third record. Or no, I'm sorry. I guess I'm thinking of the fourth. The third record's great. Some folks don't like Air Vulgaris, which I love.
Great album. I thought it was a great album.
I'm Designer is one of their best fucking songs. Fuck, what's my favorite line for that song? It's you make me an offer that I can refuse. Not can't refuse, but can refuse. Because either way I get screwed. Counter proposal, I go home and jerk off. Yeah. What an eloquent way to say fuck you. It's still a really disgusting way.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Counter proposal, I go home and fuck myself.
They hit it a lot more. I think the reason that some people like, they hit a lot harder with that album. I mean, it's so much more.
It's weird.
It is. I mean,
it's weird. I love it.
It's really, it's kind of stripped down. It's almost a little more 3-4 piece than it is like full.
In some ways,
they didn't throw a lot of the harmony action going in on it. A lot of that dynamics.
It's more raw for sure.
But I thought it was great, because they are a dynamic band. So you don't, I don't want this. I don't want the last album.
Well then, dude, like clock. Well, look, I'll say this: the very last album, when it came out, I was a little confused. I love Mark Ronson because, as we touched on, I like R&B, pop, stuff as long as it's got somebody that can really do something or other that they do. I like Mark Ronson as a producer. Really, I mean, that big Amy Winehouse record is one of my favorite records ever. Which people laugh at me all you want.
I'm a giant
fucking Amy Winehouse fan. Yeah.
Who the fuck's hating on Amy Winehouse?
No, man. Look, hey,
pull up.
I understand. Like, anytime anyone's like, "Hey, I don't really like that," I'm like, "Yo, I totally get it. I think you're a moron." But I'm sure if I have my mouth long enough, you'll be pretty sure I'm a fucking moron too. So like.
So yeah, I'm with you. It's like I don't know. I like to think my music taste is objective, but it's not. At the end of the day, it's not.
No, like, dude, my some of my business partners like actively dislike Queen, which there's a good chunk of Queen's music.
That's their shitty decision.
There's a good chunk of Queen's music that I detest. Radio Gaga, I think, is a piece of shit. And look, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but like, there's also a record in there, 2 records in there, that's some of the greatest rock music that's ever been recorded, or probably ever will be recorded. And like, just being like, no, I don't really care for the greatest singer maybe of all time. Crossed with like some genuinely kind of weird musical motifs and themes. Like, yes, Freddie Mercury is super flamboyantly gay. Okay, fine. I understand that. Like, maybe that's not your thing. That's okay. But like, I don't know. To me, it's like, again, it's just infinitely interesting.
It's one of those things that I think with an opinion on music, and I don't want to sound too elitist with this, but it's hard when you're a musician. It's a
that was his ghosts.
Bye, Alice.
She's okay. Are you all right down there?
That's not where the camera's at.
Tools. Yeah, no. Our engineer just fell over. I gotta make sure he's still know what he's doing. But basically, I have to, when people ask me my opinion on a band, I have to, if I don't listen to them, a lot of times I'll say, well, that's not my cup of tea. It's not my type of music. Sure. But it doesn't mean that I don't think, I'm not going to say they suck, because I don't, for one thing, when it comes to entertainment, I give a shit about somebody's personal policies. I'm not that interested in finding out.
All musicians are all the same. They're probably cool.
Yeah. So I don't look at it from that aspect, for one thing. And there's a lot of people that'll base their opinion on that. But they're like, well, I'll listen to so-and-so because they got it. I'm like, well, that's not what I was asking you. I was asking, do you like the song?
Yeah.
And I can hear, there's a lot of music that, like saying Queen, great example. I'm not really a huge Queen fan. Do I think Brian May is a phenomenal guitar player? Yeah. Do I think Freddie Mercury is a great singer? Yeah. Just not really my cup of tea.
Of course. And look, some of my best friends in the entire world, I agree with you in spades. I mean, really would also hold that opinion. Yeah. But again, that's why art is so absolutely fascinating.
Let's talk about this. So there's a lot of, and I'm not even like really casting judgment, but sometimes people's art taste is subjective towards the artist and not the art.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
everybody falls in that category.
I guess I'm on there too a little bit, but it's like that's always like, I don't know, it.
Like the medium.
Like, okay, for example, my roommate showed me this video of Muhammad Ali talking about how segregation laws were going away, and he was talking about how he was pro-segregation, and like he had some really radical ideas about stuff, and I'm just kind of like, why? Yes, this is a world-class boxer, arguably the best boxer of all time.
Yeah, sure.
That doesn't mean that he should run for politics or knows anything about economics, right? Or social issues necessarily.
Yeah, right.
It's like, so I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's not that boxers and musicians and
Alice over here.
Yeah, Alice over here shouldn't talk about these issues. It's just like people put them on this pedestal like they're expected to know something about it.
Certainly.
Actors. That's a great example. Actors with Twitters.
Are you going to ask an accountant for mix notes on your record? Probably not.
Probably not. And I'm probably also not going to get into when I need open heart surgery.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes back to the idea of if people can hold an opinion all they want, but what is the medium of the art? When you get into being a lyricist, a poet, a singer, somebody that is openly expressing with words, it's much more direct, because if you sing a song or you write a poem or you give a speech, you're stating an idea. If you direct a movie, you might not hold any belief in what that story says. You're just directing that film.
I think good directors do.
Right.
What that's worth.
But then also it goes back into what I got taught about songwriting. As long as it's the truth, it'll come across.
I think you make an excellent point about it, being based on the medium that's being observed as well, because it's like, if you enjoy something and then all of a sudden you don't because there's a scandal involving the person who made that thing.
Not the artist, man. I don't.
Yeah, it just raises a question of what did you enjoy about that thing to begin with.
Yeah.
Because if it's a song, and let's say there's no lyrics involved, let's say there's no poetry, no words. It's not that music isn't poetry, but there's no opinions here for you to. It's just music, and it's like, well, because of this guy's opinion, you didn't disagree with him musically, like you agreed musically on that opinion. And it's like, but this thing affects this thing. It just raises questions about why do you enjoy something? And it's like, you make an excellent point though, that if it's something that is more in that wheelhouse, like if you're let's say a director who's making a historical piece and you have a really shitty understanding of what happened,
right?
I'm sure we can all think of examples.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's like you know, another thing in my own personal life. I'm sure this happens to everybody in one way or another. Like giving examples of music I don't care for, and I'll tell you why. Bruce Springsteen, not my thing. Oh boy, not my thing. I just think it's cheesy. I don't like his voice. Part of the reason I feel that way is because growing up where I did, like that's where Bruce Springsteen broke, was Philadelphia, and so like just everybody loved him. He's on the radio all the time. Mm-hmm. People were very loud in their expression of adoration for this man, and I never understood it, and I still don't. You know, it's not that I don't think his art has any merit, or that
great songwriter.
Like, exactly
phenomenal
right, man.
Songwriter, but I understand where you're coming from.
Well, dude, and like again, I would never take that away from him. And you know, hey, look, I'm really happy. I'll give you an example of Cardi B, right?
Right.
I despise her art. I think it's vapid nonsense, man. You know, like, however, I am very happy that Cardi B gets to be at the level she's at, just being herself. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah. Do I care for what she does? No, I do not. Do I respect the fact that, do I know how much work that takes, even if there is a shitload of luck involved, which there always is? Yeah. Do I know how much work that takes to keep up? Yes. And like, she just is herself and gets paid for that. And that to me is what we all are trying to do as artists, right. You know? And so as much as like, I would rather not consume
maybe
what it is that she puts out.
At least for me, like the frustration would be like, things I think are better should be at higher levels of should be at that level.
Well, again, this goes back to karma, right? Where like the way we approach the genre that we're technically in can also make it hard to be accepted by our peers, because it's like it goes one of two ways. Either they're like, "Whoa, that's really cool," or like, "Well, you guys aren't really one of us," you know?
Right.
I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry, I interrupted you to then lose my train of thought.
You're good, man.
Yeah, I don't.
The you know, the rabbit holes get kind of deep and winding.
Yeah. I mean, that's we're chiseling away, you know, like Socrates.
Yeah. It's got to be done, Alice. It's got to be done.
And on that note, what do you think happens after we die? No one knows.
Well, no. Okay, so to me, I mean, I feel like, to worm my way out of another question you asked me, kind of, but also then explain the way in which I was worming out of it. Everything and nothing. Like, to me, I don't think that you necessarily, in so many words, because words can be absolutely useless when describing this kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't exactly buy into like, yep, we get one go around at this and then that's it, you're fucking dead. Well, that's not really the way that energy works from a measurable perspective. It's just not. So, but I also live as though I will get only one go at this, because man, like, look, I just, what's the point otherwise? Like, I was around growing up and know some fairly successful, monetarily successful people, and a lot of them just never really seem that happy to me.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing to take for granted, because it might be the only time we do this. We don't know, and it's like you said, you know, it's kind of irrelevant, really, because you should treat it like it is the only time you're going to do it.
It's astronomically unlikely that we're all three of us even sitting here in the first fucking place.
Absolutely, it's a fucking miracle.
So
it's a miracle upon a miracle.
Look, I have days where I hate everything.
Careful how much you chase that dollar, Alice.
Oh well, man, look, every great person of any kind on their deathbed, what do they all say? Every one of them. It's something to the effect of "love is the answer," right? No matter what they did, whether it's William Burroughs or, I mean, I guess Oscar Wilde said, "Do these wallpaper go?" Or I do, you know, right? But it's supposedly that's kind of a myth. Whatever, I like it, so I'm gonna in my head that's exactly how it went. They all say love is the answer, man. You know, so it's like it's not always easy to live that way. I certainly can absolutely be accused of getting very wrapped up in my own fucking bullshit, you know? But you gotta try and express some gratitude for your existence, the things that have gone well in your life, you know?
Yeah.
Things are, life is difficult, no matter who you are. If you choose the difficult, it will be a little bit easier.
Sure. And the world is falling into chaos, but it's a great time to be alive. It's an excellent time
The
to.
Gift of Nothing is about our song that the most people have heard.
Nice. It's okay, cool. Like the balance of it.
The balance of it, yeah, man, and that, in a lot of ways, this is with almost every single available metric that we can come up with, we are living through historically the best time to ever be a human being.
It's so taken for granted nowadays.
Yes.
It's such a beautiful time to be alive.
It is. We also, though, suffer from a lot of things. I know I talked to you about the breathing that I do every day, right, or 5 days a week, briefly in the backyard. Yes. Because, like I touched on earlier, too, like we get further and further away from remembering that we are fucking animals, as you touched on with a lot of our instincts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes with a whole new layer and culture of neuroses.
Yeah.
Prescribed.
Great
you
band.
are this. Yeah.
None of this is natural,
Well, that's why I was like, hey, until all this, we were killing things every single day just to survive at all.
Yeah.
Much less thrive, to the point that, as Joe Rogan says, one of my favorite quotes of all time, how long before I send you in the woods with a fucking hatchet could you send me an email?
Okay.
We stand on the shoulders of giants and say, look how tall I am. And as much as you need to express gratitude, you also have to remember that, we weren't designed, so to speak, to live in groups as large as we do. It's never happened in the scope of our history that we know about. As you touch on, there's lots we know, and the more we know, the less we know. So
sure, there's more questions.
Yeah. So I think our hive mind. My fiance made the point of like, hey, all this effectively. She's talking about anti-aging technology, so on and so forth. She's like, only the elites will have that, and I'm like, that's horseshit. You're literally holding and getting the information you're telling this to me about. You're telling me about. You got that information on something that if you described to someone 200 years ago, they wouldn't believe you. They wouldn't be able to distinguish our hive mind that we carry around in our phone. They wouldn't be able to distinguish it from fucking magic. What do you mean you have all the information ever created up to this point in your pocket? So I'm like, bullshit only be for elites. For a little while, sure.
And they'll find ways to use it against us as well. Like, for example, the Matrix. I mean, that's a thing. Oh. It's like, upload your consciousness. It's like, oh man, this is great. And then it's, it is great because you're actually on an alien planet getting your life force sucked away.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I think, not to be too woo-woo, but I would say that the joy you experience in life, the relationships that you have, positive and ones that maybe you wish you, there's so much to take away from that. And if we live in a simulation, like, I don't really fucking care.
It doesn't really matter.
Like we talked about with consciousness, how unlikely it is that you're alive, so on and so forth. Like, okay, even if there's some noticeable glitches or whatever you want to talk about, I just think, like, to me personally, now, I'm way above my pay grades. Let's not even begin to go there. It just doesn't fucking matter to me.
It doesn't. Well, it's completely irrelevant to, like, what we need to do. Like,
exactly right.
Like, we need to make art, and that, whether it's a Matrix or not, and that's all it really comes down to.
More evidence that I think it probably is not, but what do I know? Which is not
and,
a lot.
Like, maybe one day, like, we wake up and it's like, oh, it's actually a joke we're all in on, where it's like, when I murdered your entire family, that was, like, we agreed we were going to go play this game. Dude, I got you so good. You remember how upset you were that I killed your children? It's like, bro, I had you.
That's a line in one of the songs from our new record is like, I can't believe I can't remember my own fucking lyric right now, but it's like, effectively, I'm paraphrasing, is this all a joke that I'm fucking not in on?
Terrence McKenna had a thing about that called the Cosmic Giggle. He's like, it's a joke.
That's a great band name. The Cosmic Giggle.
But that's, like, that it's the joke. It's the joke. And
well, if you understand it's a joke, then you can go about life that way. Hence why I play music.
Yeah. As
we touched on with LSD, I'd taken a lot of LSD up to that horrifying story I told you. Too young. I wish that I could, in retrospect, have delayed that by 5 years, but I didn't. Such is my plight, if you will. But I mean, that's when I realized a lot of like, hey, okay, I have it great. My upbringing was amazing. My parents are amazing people. They did well for themselves, for a long time. I was unhappy. Everyone, a lot of the people I knew were unhappy, who were all successful. You know, with that in mind, I find music, you take some acid and all of a sudden you realize, like, okay, if this is all fucking bullshit, why don't I just do something I'd like to do?
Right.
Which is make art, or like we've touched on a bunch of times.
Why isn't that the natural, like, that should be the baseline of what we do, but it's not in our society.
It is, but it's just not what we're sold. And the problem is, humans, again,
it's productivity. Like, what do you output?
When you go back to, in some countries, that have tribal situations, still are like this. The musician is trained from birth. You do your duties of the tribe, but your work is to learn the tabla or learn, whatever you're playing, because you're taught when you decide, or however they decide, whatever the culture is there, because that is needed, and art is understood to be needed. And in what we call Western civilization, which I don't necessarily like calling it Western because it's scattered all over the world, we've gotten to the point where it's it's I always say it goes back to raise your hand first in class. That's what we teach, is all competition. And competition is good in nature, but everything, knowledge should not really be a competitive thing.
I completely agree.
Competition also drives innovation on all levels, right?
It does.
And as I touched on before, because I don't necessarily agree, right? Like, I think there's unhealthy competition, certainly.
Right.
Certainly. There's also healthy competition.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is many of our teachers, and hey, look, very difficult job, would not wish it upon myself, certainly, and I respect the shit out of these people, are really not fit to lead young minds,
Sure.
in the way that they need to be guided in terms of creating a productive society. These people just are not qualified.
Yeah.
Right. Oftentimes, unfortunately, they're the lowest common denominator. In many ways, not in other ways, man. Again, I know some absolutely wonderful teachers who take their job so seriously and really care about.
But yeah, they're definitely underfunded severely, just like our police force.
We tend
to do anything.
I would tend to agree with you, man. Go to LA. We had squatters in the apartment under ours smoking meth and shitting on the floor. We got video of them breaking in.
That's my kind of party.
The cops said, and I quote, "What would you like us to do about it?"
Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to yell too loud here. What the fuck do you mean? What would I like you to do about it, man? Do you know how much of my money you take so that you fucking do something about it? Get your ass over here and chuck them the fuck out. Well, they can't because there's laws to protect these folks.
These public servants ain't serving me. Haven't been a long time.
No, man. And like, look, it's just it's the nature of the thing, unfortunately, and we've reached enough people that they have that the all knowing and all powerful they have power over. That you're just with that job, you're just not attracting the kind of folks that could actually enact change. You're attracting, by and large, some of the more profoundly narcissistic people you've ever. I mean, dude, who can you imagine meeting a fucking person who seriously says the words to you? Yes, I'm going to be president. What kind of nut wants that job? Do you see what the kind of aging they have? I mean, it's just not, and it's like, so you get these people who are like, effectively want to be written in history books, and of course they are, but I mean, that's also not.
That's the wrong reason to lead.
It doesn't make them leaders.
That's the wrong reason to lead.
I don't believe in, like, we don't actually have any kind of say in our government.
Certainly not. I don't believe in money the vote to have say.
Right. Yeah, there's no.
Look, I think voting philosophically, and keep in mind, I didn't vote in like 3 elections that I was eligible to. Also, as an adult, I think it is philosophically an important thing to do. I just do.
I would wish I did, because in theory, it is. I just don't believe I think it's a piece of paper, man. I don't think they do anything.
Well, and like, depending on who it is you want to listen to, and everybody on all sides will tell you different things. Our votes, like, really might not count, and maybe haven't counted at all for quite a while. and are potentially just being changed too, depending on the situation, and and it's just
the election selection.
I guess I'm also saying it gets more into like our choices are one of two. It's like, and they're both the same.
Machine,
maybe we get to pick,
for lack of a better term.
Maybe we get to pick the left hand or right hand, but
they're both going to smack you. What does it fucking matter?
Both, yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And to me, I'm just interested in whomever at that moment, because it is a swinging pendulum. Whoever at that moment is just going to more realistically let me live the kind of life that I'd like to live, because that used to be one of the tenets of our country, right? I mean, there was, as long as you weren't actively hurting other folks, pretty much do what you wanted.
There was no such thing as victimless crime at one point.
I'm honestly at a point where I don't believe in a change with the system. I think bricks and fire are the only way we get out of this.
Look, I unfortunately, I hope that you're wrong. You know what I mean? Really, I do, because I think that, look, at some point in every generation or two, even with our country, things happen where people say exactly what you're saying, exactly what I've said, because I've said that same kind of thing. Is like, there's going to be a fight, and it's going to be a bummer. You know what I mean?
X said, by any means necessary, and I think, it's not any more than necessary, but I think that's just where I'm at, and I'm pessimistic. I would love to have my mind changed on that.
Well, look, man, I think, again, with every generation or two, you've gone through this thing where someone would like to, or someone's, or they, if you will, want to take away what makes our country different from a lot of other countries. Now, that the world's caught up in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? Which is that, like, hey, there's no caste system here. Whether that's a caste system through, like Soviet communism, where, like, hey, it's just you're doing what you're doing, and
with all the issues, it's arguably the best place to be.
Well, certainly from the perspective of, like, if you're born a serf, you remain a serf. No, I mean, that's not true. Like, look at any of the people, like we were saying about hard times, hard men, so on and so forth. I think I had it fairly easy growing up. Now I would like to think up to this point I've taken enough lumps as fucking any other person. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of times when life is too easy, you're not worth a shit.
Sure.
You're just not. I think it's cyclical throughout history. And we're at the point where things are so good that we're creating our own problems to some extent.
Oh yeah.
Also,
no doubt.
Damn it, I got stoned with you guys, and
no, you're
when
good,
that
man.
happens to me, I lose my train of thought. Oh right. So if you're born a serf, you don't just remain a serf. I mean, a lot of the folks that have really made something of themselves in the last 100 years in this country, if you hear their story, like, people, it's cool right now to dislike wealthy people, right? Say that, well, they couldn't have gotten that honestly. Well, no, a lot of them really did, and a lot of them really went through fucking hell to make that happen.
Yeah.
More work than most people can imagine doing. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of what's still pretty cool about our country. Like, I can start my pop gives me a hard time about being broke. Have to remind him, hey man, I was going to go to school to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm pretty sure it was you that was like, hey man, you're pretty good at music. Why don't you go to music school? Now you're giving me a hard time that I'm broke, dude. Like, you gotta pick a lane. I'm sorry, you gotta.
And like it's different times too, man. Like, as good as technology has made it, there's some things that are shittier than they were a few decades ago. Certainly, it's harder in a lot of ways.
Technology makes us lazy.
Well, and comparison, we can compare ourselves to folks whose lives we will never live and would like to live when it comes down to it, which is kind of the point I was making. Like, but that also, like I said, with competition, historically drives innovation. Right. It just does. Like,
when you're building things, what I was actually
there's a reason that Soviet technology is shit, because there's no competition.
Competition with
makes sense.
Competition is great with the action, but when it comes to the knowledge shouldn't be segregated.
That I agree. That I agree with 100%.
And the problem with the way things are taught is because our government school system is structured the same way our government is structured. And it's a weird form of merit backed by policy change, you know. And one thing that happened, I mean, even when I was in school, it was happening then, you know, other countries like Japan were starting to surpass us in numbers when it came to education. So what occurred here was, because our government being designed the way it is, you know, you adjust the components of the motor to make the motor run differently. Sure. Even though it's not running more efficiently, it appears to. And so that's what they do. They just adjusted our numbers here. And that's why the education system literally dumbed down some. You know, it made it easier and it gave less of a challenge. But at the same time, it started segregating the knowledge. You know, there's things that they don't want people to learn about. And
it's
that's
like
the thing is,
can't give them the keys to Ferrari, man. They're gonna crash it. You know?
Right.
It's like the scientific theory is not a cult because it's subject to change. Rigorous change.
That's what science means.
But the government proposed modern versions of certain sciences and your belief in such things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you don't think these things are subject to change, if you hold them as fact, and anything the government would tell us is an absolute fact about science, not subject to change, right, then that's like, I mean, you don't have like, you could, even if you don't think there's something nefarious going on with the government at any point in time, maybe they just don't know what they're doing, right?
Well, reality's terrifying.
They're obviously not good with money.
The rest of us.
Yeah. I mean, they're obviously not good with money.
They're good with spending it.
How many trillion in debt?
They're so bad with money they have to break your legs and say, well, you know, a couple extra tax dollars, well, I got a great cast, some crutches. And you're like, whoa, what happened to my leg? They're like, well, that's not the important part. The important part is, like I said, about if you give me a little bit more money, I got this stuff that you probably need.
It'd be like that.
Don't worry about the fact that you're limping on a crutch. Your neighbors aren't.
Hey, I got something to throw at you guys.
Yeah, sure.
So this was something me and my roommate were going back and forth about. So I'm very much like a small government kind of person.
Yeah.
I very much so believe like the government, like I believe in a government, but it should be restricted. It only should perform basic functions
to protect and serve.
Yes, and like it basically
don't need those.
There's
things,
a line.
fuck alone.
Right, there's a line of bare minimum, and I think that's debatable of where the bare minimum is, but I think they should ultimately be doing the bare minimum of, like, not bare minimum of like bare
minimum of legislation, certainly.
Yes, thank you. Very bare bones legislation is what I mean. But
don't rape, don't fucking touch kids.
Yes,
don't kill other people for no goddamn reason, or even if you have a pretty good reason, let us deal with that. You know, let the peers deal. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, like, but at least that's what I thought I believed until I was talking to my roommate last night. Now I'm thinking, and then this is something that's like while we were talking, I was like, hey, maybe this would be a better idea. What if we had like the opposite of that? What if we had a world government, but what they did was enforce liberty? So it's like the Constitution and like constitutional rights, but that's all they do is enforce your autonomy and free will. So I guess what I'm saying is there wouldn't be like state to state legislation. You couldn't go somewhere different, but you have ultimate freedom anywhere you go. You can do whatever drugs you want. You can own whatever guns you want, as long, let's say it's harder to get them if it's a fucking assault rifle. But like the point is you have the capability of getting these things. So it's like ultimate freedom everywhere, and it's enforced. So it's like you'd actually have a competent police force that's
like spread democracy.
Man, it's like it would only work this way.
I think that was tried in the middle, or they said they tried that in the Middle East quite a few times in the past 50 years.
I'm pretty sure they were just there to take their heroin and oil, dude. I don't think they were trying, unless that's what liberty is.
But what American government form of installing that is installing infrastructure, and then everything is put on the American dollar. And I can't talk too much about that, Alice, because I'll disappear in a white van.
Well, look, man,
as long as they have candy, that's... Sorry.
No. Hey, to me, politics was something that I avoided like the plague. Because again, growing up, some people very, very close to me, some of my most cherished confidants, uh, very, very into and borderline obsessed with politics in a lot of ways, not in some other ways, and that didn't seem to enrich their life or reality or perception of reality. And so I was kind of like, well, I want nothing to do with that ever. If that's just going to if that's how it's going to make me feel.
It's like a religion.
Exactly. But I don't want to get into too many details. But basically, they had pretty good reason for feeling this way. And I understand, even though I don't always agree, I understand, certainly. Until I got a little bit older and the state government, of California locked my ass up inside and told me that my life was over for, I'll spare you my shit. But I wouldn't go there until all of a sudden, we're talking about me not being able to live my life. And then I was kind of, something or other pilled. I'm not sure which pill I took.
I'm affected by this all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, maybe I should be fucking mad, and maybe I should give a shit. And so I went about educating myself a little bit. And I'd like to think I have my own opinion. Certainly, I mean, I'm kind of a weird guy.
I grew up in an era at the back end of punk rock when people were, we were getting told as youth that this kind of shit will never happen. This is back into the Cold War. There's what are y'all talking about? This would never happen. The government will never turn, and yada yada. And one of the things people got really upset with me about, and have for a decade now, is me literally pointing out, I don't want to be the one to say I told you so, but I told you so, like, before some of these people were born, and it happened, and it still happens, and it happens in small ways, and it happened in a really big way.
And then you can go back to like Malcolm X at Berkeley,
right,
in '64. Mm-hmm. You can go back to George Orwell, and also in no, that was 1964. That was written in, or 1984, written in '62, something like that.
Alice Huxley with
Brave New World.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brave New World. I was about to say Doors of Perception, which is not very good at all.
And then you have the Book of Revelations.
Yeah.
That predates those other things we mentioned just by a little bit.
Which is definitely just a DMT trip or something of that like.
But it's strangely prophetic. There's a lot of that's the thing. I know we've talked about it off camera, but like I was raised like really religiously, and religion was like you're talking about with politics early on. It was something I really like avoided, because
I was the same way with religion. We can talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
but please continue.
But that now that I got older, it's like I have a really deep appreciation for the Torah and for the New Testament too.
It's brilliant. The messaging is brilliant.
Yeah, and I get really frustrated at people, because it's like the people that are most passionate about this, not the most passionate. Like you're like, you have people that devote their lives to this, but a lot of people that propose to be fanatic about it know very little about it.
Are full of shit.
It's like, I know so much more about your book than you do. It's like, have you read the book that you worship?
What about the history of the book? Do you know anything about that? Not you, the general.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, it very much frustrates me, because the lack of understanding leads to a lack of understanding the principles as well. And like what the message is all of the time. If you take it like, for example, fundamentalists, taking it literally is like, you're missing the point so much.
On purpose, almost.
Right. Yeah, and you're missing the point so much that the message you're getting out of it is different from the one intended. Yeah.
Which is amazingly hilarious.
But you also resented religion growing up as well. What
Well, yeah. I really did, because from very early age, I went to Catholic school up until my junior.
Talked about this.
Up until my junior year in high school, from kindergarten to my junior year in high school, because, look, that was how my parents, my father certainly is like a paper genius. I mean, he's brilliant. His memory is insane. He can tell you about a book he read when he was 5 in great detail, and recite excerpts from it. It's just like, what the fuck is the matter with you? How can you do? Yeah. Anyway, point being, that's how they're raised, and so I went to Catholic school too. by my junior year in high school, I'd fucking had it. I decided pretty early on, 10 or 11 years old, I'm like, this really just sounds like I'm not supposed to have a good time. And
that's one of the core tenets.
And if you do, you got to go sit in a box and tell some weird old dude.
Tell some weirdo who's jerking off about it. You know what I mean?
Like, I'm going to tell you about my good
He's
time.
having a good time.
Well, and man, and you know, even just from what we know about human organizations throughout history, that was just to fucking extort powerful people for money and other things that they needed. That's why confession. Did you guys know that until a couple hundred years ago, priests were allowed to get married? The church was just paying for too many fucking priest divorces, so they were like, "All right,
oh shit,
now you're celibate."
Damn, you lost your dick privileges.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So all this stuff that at least me as a Roman Catholic, I went to a Roman Catholic high school, and a nominally Roman Catholic and Augustinian, or no, I'm sorry, I went to a Roman Catholic grade school and an Augustinian high school, and yeah, these fucking people, like all this stuff is just made up as they go along. And again, like you said, one of the core tenets is that I'm not allowed to enjoy myself really in any way, shape, or form. I'm just supposed to praise God and give the church money. From an early age, that seemed pretty fucking crooked to me, you know, and like I just was like, these people are hypocrites. They're all mean, miserable hypocrites. Now, that is not to say that I don't know many wonderful Christians who try to go about their life enriching the world. And hey, if that's how you get there, to making other people's lives better, I would like to personally give you a fucking high five, because that's amazing, and please keep doing whatever it is that you're doing that led you to that.
I just said that very thing to some Mormons that you were kind of getting on my nerves, but I appreciate what you do. It's if I thought I was saving the world doing that, I'd probably be doing it too.
Absolutely. And they're taking the only time they have here on this earth, and they're trying to devote it to helping other folks.
That's my mom and my sister, man. Like, my sister is a regular pioneer, which means she knocks on doors 70 hours a month. And that's, like, you know, she's got... a lot
of your fucking time.
And she's got an apartment in New York.
You've been jerking off or doing... Sorry.
Yeah, she's got a couple of roommates in an apartment in New York, you know? But, like, she's got a full-time job. And it's like, she does that in her spare time. It's like... And it's because they think they're saving your life when they knock on your door, not just this life, but your eternal life.
Well,
and it's like, I have such a deep respect for that.
As do I.
It makes me very upset at the organization that misleads these people. Because imagine what other great things could be done if people weren't misled by religious cults.
Well, it's really meant to keep people in line so that their only joy in life isn't raping and pillaging. To a certain extent.
At the core of what we do here, Alice, is just very that. We take the time to make sure everybody can speak what they want and have people on that have all kinds of different opinions. And in our own little way, we're saving the world. We're saving you, Alice.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I'm still very much an evangelizer, like trying to spread the good news of the Lord.
That's music to me, man.
Yeah, man.
You know?
Dude, and on that, I don't mean to cut you off again.
No, not at all.
But, like, when I moved out when I was 18 and got away from all that. And I was homeschooled. You and I had a very, not the same upbringing, but similar backgrounds for sure. Like, and when I got away from all of that, like, I didn't know anyone. Like, you know, everyone was in my church because I was also homeschooled. So
right, that's a whole.
So like I knew nobody, and like I started going to shows. I went to the East Room, actually. It was the first like local thing I'd gone to, and man, like I can say like without a shadow of a doubt that live music saved my life.
Yeah,
like,
mine too, man.
It
many times over.
It replaced that social dynamic I had from church.
Yes.
And it's something equally or more so spiritual.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I'm not a spiritual cat.
Not to suck your dick too much, but you know, like what you guys do is really important.
Thank you.
Know, like you never know what that's going to do for someone.
Thank you. Look, man, what you're saying is literally why I do what I do. Because, like, man, you know, I'm a reasonably bright guy. Am I the brightest guy? No, but reasonably bright guy. Like, I was bummed out as a kid. I was bummed out. I was just, I couldn't, you know, like I joke about as a 32-year-old man, reality is horrifying. I mean, I mean that so profoundly every time I say it. Now, there are many things that make it a lot less horrifying, like having good conversations, like music, like my lady, like my dear friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, as somebody that's like just bummed all the time, music has that's not stopped when I'm an adult. I found ways to counteract it. Right? Music has just saved my life over and over and over and over again, and I've always thought that it would be an absolute honor in every way that I can cut it, doing that for other people. Which is why I never understand when you meet musicians that are professional musicians and they're miserable. I'm like, dude, do you know how many bad things I would do to be in the position you're in, to be like touching that many people in a way that to them is so profound all the time? Like that's my life's dream. Not for any more. Certainly at some point in my life, I'm like, wouldn't it be sick to be famous? I don't even feel that way at all now. I'm pretty like, leave me the fuck alone kind of guy. But like, being able to affect, that's why I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to talk to other bummed out kids and kind of be like, hey, look, it gets better. That's what a lot of my music is about. A lot of music is about, like, I say myself, someone else, one other person, and then people in general, right? And a lot of the message of my music is like, yo, whatever it is, it's definitely your fault. Also, if you choose to, you can do something about it.
Yeah. And that's the first step, is understanding, and like that way you can get some footing in reality, and like,
Yeah, I took away your point of music. Music has saved my life. It's important to me.
No, dude. And that's gets back into like that playing a song that touches someone, that ripples out, like now they're interacting with people better in their lives, they're treating their family life better, they're interacting with people better at school, at work, that ripples outwards. And it's like a small thing can, like a ripple, waves.
Well, because someone that you might idolize is essentially feeling some of the same things you do.
And on that point, I wanted to bring up something we were talking with Jasmine about when she was on the show. Is I think you and her mostly disagreed with me on this, but I basically what I was trying to say is evil is not only immoral by definition, it's also stupid. It's unwise. And my reasoning for that is you don't understand the consequence of what you're doing. So it's like the ripple of doing something good. When you hurt someone, you don't know how you don't really understand. If you punch someone in the face, for example, you understand the impact physically of what's happened, maybe, or maybe you don't. You don't understand, like, let's say emotionally, what that impact is going to have. It might, depending on the person, it might affect them very differently, right? So it's like now you don't understand how it's going to affect the people that have to deal with this person. And now that stems out, and now something else has happened. And it's like the punch in the face is a bad example. You get drunk and hit someone with your car, and it's like that affects the consequences of that. You'll never understand.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to quantify it.
Well,
and because
I think the breakdown what we had to do with intent.
Well,
because if you're drunk, you didn't intend on hitting a family and killing them, but it happened.
It happened anyway.
The action could be looked at as an evil action. But
the road to hell is laid with the best of intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's also usually the least resistance.
I guess, like, even if you're a complete psychopath and you don't care about causing harm, you're unaware. When you do something evil, you're unaware of how that's going to come back to bite you, because there's no way you can fully rectify that. Potentially someone you pissed off 10 years ago could come back to bite you. It's Absolutely. Like that could happen. And it's like, or a perfect example is like these sexual assault cases that we're seeing all the time now, right? It's like Bill Cosby didn't think about it in the fucking 80s,
right?
At all,
right?
Now he's like, oh, okay, like maybe I should have thought about that,
right?
Well, man, to the opposite of your point, like the evil part of it, we're talking about music being able to touch people and hopefully provide some kind of well-being in their life. When I had like most of my music gear stolen from me right in the middle of the Karma record that we're now mixing, right?
That
Like
does
$10,000 worth of stuff,
You
including
always
the
hate
guitar
to
I'll
hear
never
that.
get back. Yeah, and I had so much gear in my car because we were just going home to sleep and we were back to the studio for another 16-hour day.
Damn.
So my dumb ass left my stuff in my car. So we got my key fob signal, took my shit. Well,
Damn.
I'm after the initial shock of like, wait, where's my shit that I need for today and tomorrow and the next day?
Right.
I was like, not psyched. I ended up putting up a GoFundMe, which my friends were in the process of doing when I put it up. I didn't really tell anybody about it because I was super embarrassed. Man, I had like 60 people, some of whom I've never spoken to, some of whom I haven't spoken to in 10 years. I had a waking moment that you would have at your funeral if you were there, where I just had all these people who were like, hey man, been watching your journey for a decade. Here's $100. Yeah. Please don't stop playing music.
Right. That's how it's supposed to work, man.
Exactly.
That's
so just like you don't understand the ripples you're creating when you do something bad, you really can't. There's no way
you can't
to understand the positive of things.
Absolutely.
Either. And so that's why, like you were saying, there are things that are objectively just evil and wrong. And to me, the evidence to that is like when you're on mushrooms or LSD or DMT, like you're not all of a sudden turning from a regular cat into somebody that's like, it'd be fun if I killed like 60 people right now.
Right.
No, I mean, that would, that's universally people have kind of the same feeling there when that happens. Like, even if you're having a bad trip, you're not like, whoa, I need to kill other people. You might be like, God is telling me to kill myself.
If you lash out and do something crazy under a substance, it's usually not the sake of you deciding to be evil. It's, crazy hallucinations,
Yeah.
Somebody goes running in the street shooting at stuff, tripping. It's not because they decided they want to kill everything. It's because
they're trying to protect themselves.
They're seeing something and they're freaking out and they're like, you're all coming at me, so, and everybody's like, no, we're not.
And there's a lot to be afraid of in this world. And when you're on a drug paranoia binge, that's totally, we all been there.
Hey, look, to me, especially as an artist, let's say for the sake of argument that you do kind of let in a little bit more information, whether that's sonically or visually or stimuli, whether you let in more stimuli than the average cat, like nature almost demands that we push those boundaries. Look at the animals. Elephants, will eat fermented fruit. Monkeys will eat fermented fruit. You're always trying to alter your reality and push the boundaries of that. And I think, that's partially why artists are drawn to drugs, because it's like, well, yeah, this is cool.
It's frontier, man.
But what if I dipped into...
We're pioneers, man.
Well, to me, on somebody... Did I tell you to read The Infinity Key?
That I wrote down a few things. I think I wrote that one down.
Make sure you write that down.
In case I didn't.
The Infinity Key. It is about the influence of psychedelics on every religion that's ever existed. Right. I'm boiling down to just the most mentally diverse points at this moment. It's reasonably heady. The guy makes some very good points. Now you see what you want to see, and I think he falls prey to that as well. However, there's some decent evidence to suggest that what he's saying is not entirely bullshit.
What's he saying, more or less?
More or less is that every good book, so to speak, whether that's... pick a religion, doesn't matter. Every good book has pretty good evidence for psychedelics. And if you go to those parts of the world and examine some of these ritualistic spots and things that were made... He uses a lot of wine as an example, because wine is age old, and how we define fermented grapes as wine now, that's not what wine used to be 2,000 years ago. It's just simply not. They're not the same fucking thing.
Ergot, things like this. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's funny because this is, I'm not familiar with this, but these are concepts I've heard before from other people.
And he's piggybacking off of some work that 2 or 3 professors did, spanning from the 60s to about the 80s before they were completely exiled.
That seems entirely not only plausible, but very likely to me that I'm not too deep on some of the other faiths, but when it comes to like Judaism and Christianity, these seem like ancient mushroom cults to me.
Absolutely right in a lot of ways. And let's say, for the sake of argument, and the point that lots of folks have made, the McInnes?
Yeah,
have
Dennis
made,
and Terrence. Yeah.
That Jesus is actually a mushroom.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Hey, look, man,
I've seen that.
Look, I simply can't speak to that. I just can't, and it would do anyone listening a disservice.
Well, here's the thing, Alice. It's equally as likely for him to be a person.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
Well said. But the point of the book is like a lot of these texts were not translated very well. There's concrete examples of that in any number of these religions, and so a lot of the messages, sometimes on purpose, have been conflated. A lot of the stories have been conflated. A lot of the how these things came to pass, because you can't give, like I said earlier, you can't give the plebs keys to the fucking Ferrari. You just can't do it.
Sure.
You just can't do it. Not if the folks that do have the keys would like to remain in possession of the keys, so to speak. So,
or you want to keep the Ferrari intact.
So you give them
fly too high.
You give them bits and pieces of what it's like to drive a Ferrari.
Sure.
Sometimes, or what maybe that would be like if the Ferrari existed in the first place. You know what I mean? So,
if everybody had the knowledge to build it, the people who managed to build it would be the ones capable of using it.
Exactly. Well, it's like okay, you've seen a Ferrari, yeah. Have you been in a Ferrari? No. Well, you've ridden the bus? Yeah. Well, philosophically, it's similar, but it's not the fucking same at all. Yeah. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I don't really have to tell you. So here's what I wrote while driving that Ferrari. Right. You can't really both drive the Ferrari and write. So good luck. Right. Here you go. Have fun with that.
The bus. Have you ridden the bus? Well, have you driven the bus?
Also, make sure that you tell me who your partner is so that we can extort you.
Yeah.
And don't fuck anybody. Until you've told me about it, because then it will be harder for me to extort you and your children and your grandchildren and your grandchildren's children and your so on and so forth.
It's like an abusive relationship, actually.
Well, look, and that's the frustrating part, right? Is because like anything else, humans both come up with absolute wonderful magic, and then take that magic and they fuck it up, So it's like
put a price tag on it.
That was really well put.
Thank you. It's like they take that magic, they license it to Walmart.
Yeah.
And then now we get it and we're like,
right.
This isn't fucking magic. What are you talking about?
Right.
This thing fell apart as soon as I opened. The packaging was put together better than this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So, do you believe in aliens from outer space, and have they interacted with Earth?
Look, man, I do, okay. Very very short, and then less short answer. Mm-hmm. Yes, and probably, or probably and probably, or yes and yes. I mean, it doesn't matter. You pick one. Some combination of those two. I like what my dad and some bits of what my roommates and folks around me kind of have to say about it. My dad is pretty convinced that aliens not only exist but are just other humans, which I like a lot. And my roommate and my dad says that if aliens are indeed visiting us, that's probably just some kind of fucking tourism. That might actually be a Josh Lonnie point. I forget. Either way, you know what I mean? Like, again, it's something else.
5 touches on.
Something else, and I don't mean these phrases literally in so many words, but the arrogance of man to think that he can do it better than God is always confusing to me to some extent. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that we just take for granted, as we were talking about earlier, that it's like established. Oh yeah, when you do this thing, this is what happens. And when you talk to the people that made this fucking thing, they're like, we don't know why that happens. We have no idea why that fucking happens. We know that it happens. We have no idea why. It's like, dude. And so eventually we will probably, because of, at its core, writing, get to a point that we will be able to monkey around with quote-unquote God things. Now, I don't mean man on the cloud. I don't mean aliens. I don't mean whatever you mean, probably because I'm me and not you. Sure. But when I say God, I just mean things you can't put your finger on, consciousness.
Comparatively to what we are.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Exactly. So, I just think the fact that people think that on every level of everything, no, I can do it better than millions of years of trial and error through evolution.
We have such a short history. Humans have such a short fucking history.
But no, man, we gotta figure it out. I tell you what, I read the Cliff Notes. So I am, in fact, an expert. Have you read the Cliff Notes?
I haven't.
No, I didn't think so. You certainly haven't read the fucking book. Because
I watched the YouTube video of a guy who read the Cliff Notes.
I watched the YouTube video of a guy talking about a dude he knew that read the Cliff Notes.
You're basically a master. That's a master's degree.
Right. I could read the actual text, but I like cat videos and fucking and doing drugs. So instead,
right.
I took a glance. I own somewhere in my attic in Los Angeles, or maybe in Philadelphia, the Cliff Notes. You know what I
mean? Yeah. Right.
I don't know what I was talking about.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been very great, but I do have another question.
Please.
So, or interdimensional aliens. We talked about ghost stories, and but what do you think there is life outside of this plane?
I've met some of it.
Okay, yeah. We've talked about DMT, but yeah, that's an interesting thing. Is like, I know atheists who've done DMT, and they report. One of my best friends.
All of a sudden, God doesn't seem so fucking ridiculous, does it?
Yeah, but he's also like.
I'm kidding.
He's hard logic, and I'm not really, but he's very hard logic to the point where he's like, well, it's equally like, even though this absolutely 100% is not what I experienced. If I look at it logically, there's nothing to say that this was not contained within my mind.
And see, I fall under the complete opposite. I fall under the complete opposite set of views, where I think that most of those things, in one way or another, in so many words, which I've repeated over and over, and excuse me, but in so many words, I think many of the things that you perceive while you're in that particular, whatever state that is, do probably exist all the time in one shape or another, and it just, again, it doesn't serve us to perceive those things, because
I agree.
We can't get eaten by a lion if we're talking to fucking feathered aliens all the time.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. We've actually evolved to block such things out.
Because
it's not relevant to survival.
And maybe a lot of people that we as a society, not that we in this room necessarily, because I would be one of these people in a lot of ways, label as fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just seeing a little bit more of what's.
Absolutely. A lot of the greatest minds of all history were insane.
There's an old theory that actually comes from some of the guys that discovered the psychedelics in the 60s, that they were doing studies with schizophrenics with dimethyltryptamine, and they had an idea that schizophrenia might just be either a misstep in evolution or the next movement of our brains going to where they're supposed to be going, and we just can't really conceive on that.
I think there's, if you sat down and did this study with schizophrenic folks, I'm not sure that you'd feel the same way. I mean, I think many of these people are profoundly broken in a lot of ways. Does that mean I think that we should lock them up and throw away the key? Right. No, certainly not.
That's in essence what they were getting at, was saying that it's broken.
Okay, I missed.
So what we're seeing from where our perspective is, but it's not. It's either a break. It's either like evolution in nature comes from mutation.
Yeah.
A mutation that isn't really a mutation because it works.
Well, mutations, we define it, but in literal definition.
So if there's a mental mutation, it might be part of that next step. It just might be failed, or it might not be where it needs to be going. And that's what they're trying to look at. That's why they're using, when they discovered dimethyltryptamine, DMT, that's one of the things that's tried to use.
Well, people have been using DMT potentially for 5,000 years.
Right. I'm talking about
as a molecule.
As when they put the name dimethyltryptamine.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I was not trying to.
I was actually talking to Josh about the Levites had domes in the sand, and they would get inside and hotbox DMT. We found carbon analysis reveals they were smoking ayahuasca.
Yep.
Oh, really?
That's because he goes, this guy who actually went to the high school that I almost went to. He's also from Philly. The guy that wrote that book I was telling you about. Shout out to Brian Marescu, who I spoke to on Instagram for a second because I read his book and I was like, thanks for writing that. Yeah. Appreciate you. That was dope. But he went around. He actually went to the crypts underneath the Vatican, which like nobody sees.
Wow.
And he went all over the world to ancient ritual sites and took samples of all these different winemaking and beverage and ritualistic libations, and took samples of all these stuff and found some wild shit. Mm-hmm. Like I touched on wine, as we define it as fermented grape. Wine is, people called it, and again, that definition has been conflated, right? Like they're not talking about wine, they're talking about a beverage that they consume for any that there was hundreds and thousands of variations on that included all kinds of stuff. It was not just grapes. It was never just grapes. It was always.
There was a man years ago that did a study on tombs and mummifications and finding the different things that were packed in the mummies.
Yeah.
And even in Egypt, they said that there were herbs and substances that were nowhere around there, that they had to go way the fuck somewhere to get these things.
Well, the landscape of Egypt has changed a lot too.
Right. But I'm talking about an even. Yeah. And that's also the idea behind that. But there's,
like historical topography.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And it's really just, it's one of those things where we're going, we didn't see much of this use in anything else in their culture, but we found it packed in mummies. It's kind of like saying a lot of ritual stuff is like that. You're not going to find it just household all over the place. It's like this one spot that was so sacred that it actually lasted the test of time when houses got run down, but the temple's still kind of.
You look at it from space and you're like, they chose there? How did they know that shit?
Right.
Yeah. It's genius. It's so far, like, the tour is like this too. It's so far beyond, like, to this day we don't fully understand how the Torah was written. It's very complex, even the way it was done.
It's recency bias, man.
Yeah.
Look, there's some pretty good evidence to suggest that in the last 5,000 or 10,000 years that the shape of our faces have actually changed as our brains have developed and gotten bigger. However, maybe I'm way underestimating the amount of years. Maybe I'm talking more 30,000 years. However, humans have existed in the form that we sit here now in our nice cushy houses with our robot dicks and whatever else. You know what I mean? Like, we've existed in this form for quite a long time. And imagine when we didn't have this to distract us all the time.
Yeah.
Think about what people spent their lives doing. You had, how many monks do you think there are now? I'll say fucking none compared to 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because of these things.
Yeah.
Right? The complicated point that I'm going down to a cell phone. Fine, I understand that. But, without all these distractions, and like you said earlier, with losing some of our instincts, I mean, I think if you, just the beverage we consumed here, if you gave that to someone 1,000 years ago, like, they would be feeling all kinds of fucking ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's more recency bias. I couldn't tell you.
It's gotta be. It's gotta be.
They might not even like that. They might drink it.
They might. They might. Yeah, make them. It's so sweet. It's like immediately sick.
But caffeine. I drink so much coffee that I wouldn't even register the caffeine in there. Yeah. Someone's never had caffeine before.
Right.
He's gonna feel high as fuck, dude.
Yep.
Yeah. Actually,
also refined sugar.
Yeah.
Refined sugar. That's
Yep.
They that's like runner's juice right there.
Yeah.
Somebody that's never had that. I mean, they'd be ready to run for hours.
Yep.
And then they'd sleep for days on the sugar crash. They just like.
Yeah, so I think we've gotten away from being animals. Is an point I make often to anyone that will listen.
So you've interacted with spirits through DMT. Have you ever used a Ouija board or any kind of oracular device like that?
No, I have not. In so many words, look, I guess it would be a little bit silly for me to be like, I don't believe in that shit, because like when it comes down to it, I do believe that when I'm on stage, maybe this is very arrogant of me because I can't say this for certain, but I also have played to a packed room of people singing one of my songs, which is an indescribable feeling. I mean, like at that point, you really are leading a ritualistic ceremony.
Electric church, as Jimmy called it.
Thank you. Exactly. You're leading the electric church, and that's what it is to me. Certainly, it's where I feel like myself is on stage, even though that's nerve-wracking to some people. So like I do believe in the exchanging of energy in many different ways. So I suppose that could be something plausible that could happen. I just don't.
And I'm just curious about what you're saying. So you believe in spirits. You've interacted with spirits. What is it about that seems unlikely to you? What
the
is
fact
it?
that Haribo sold it to kids.
Oh, but I mean, but as
look,
we were talking about, like the magic, we create the magic, and then man,
exactly,
Walmart,
well, yes,
it's like so. This was a thing that was patented, basically, and it's actually not anything specific about the board itself. It's a ritual. It's an object that was it's based. It comes from Italy, I want to say. They would take a board or a sheet or something, and they'd write letters on it, and they'd place pellets in each of the letters, and they have a chicken. Put the chicken on there, and,
right? Yes.
And what happens is then the chicken is eaten, and the wishbone is taken, and that's what makes the plant shit. So there's a lot of
got it.
So the reason I was asking about for clarification on what you meant is I think like the Bible, a lot of people's understanding of what's being said about it is incorrect. I've interacted, I believe, many times with spirits, and I'm open to that not being the case as well. I think that's healthy,
and I'm open to it being the case.
Sure,
I will say in my life, being a musician, because musicians are also leaders of rituals to some extent.
Oh, 100%.
You run into a lot of people that are full of shit, almost as a rule, and so I'm very sensitive to.
Sure. And
being the recipient of a huckster, that's something that I have a very hard time with. So that's part of it as well.
I 100% know what you mean, and I've experienced that a lot as well.
Yeah.
And it's something it's a major concern with.
Major concern.
You have there's so many cults and pitfalls in our society of people that will hijack your consciousness.
Absolutely right. And I really. I feel a disdain and loathing for a lot of those people.
Sure.
Because that's mine.
It's and like this, definitely not.
It's the only thing that's mine, really.
Right.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and I'm definitely not trying to peer pressure you or prove anything to you, but this is something I've had a lot of strange experiences with, and if you've never done it, I'd be interested to see what you thought about it. I think with the thing you need to watch out, especially with people that talk about magical concepts, is are you talking about it, or can you show me?
Yeah, sure.
What you're talking about, and that's it's always been like I'm not sure how much we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it some more after Alice has left. But when I left being religious and left the cult I was in, I was very much an atheist. Yeah. But I was like hardcore atheist. But I was like, you know what? I want to see what's out there. So I got very into the occult and black magic in a superficial way of like, well, let's just try it. I don't believe in it, but let's just try. I was like, it was almost like, not almost. It was, I was poking fun at these things, purposely trying to provoke reactions. And something I found in my studies, which is where I think people's misconceptions come. When you get into magic, you basically have a couple of definitions. You have things that are isolated specifically to fantasy, like Harry Potter shooting fire out of your hands. Then you have magical practice, magical study. People, and no one really is saying that, no one that's credible in any way, shape, or form to anyone is saying that you can shoot fire out of your hands.
Yeah, sure.
I've never seen an object levitate.
Yeah.
I've never seen a planchette move on its own. The way these things work from my understanding, is it's a connection within you. So it's like this thing is operating your hand.
Yeah.
You are the thing that's moving it.
Yeah.
So it's not breaking any physics. I don't.
It's like I said about songwriting. It's like I know I wrote that. It's arguably mine. It's arguably mine. However, a part of it doesn't feel like mine.
That is the best example you could anyone could point to. That is exactly like that. It's channeling.
I'm good at examples because that's how I relate things to something that I can grapple with.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In my own experience, which a lot of times is music or whatever. You know.
Yep. And like this is where a lot of people get misconceptions with it too. Like music, like any kind of art, you're gonna be a stronger receiver for that channel. The more altered your mind state is, right? Well, so it's like if you're tripping your balls off, this is gonna work better.
Yeah.
Your mind's more malleable to it. Whereas like if you are with some friends and you're all sitting around the board and you're all like, there's 6 of you and you're all bullshitting with each other. It's like, which one of you moved it? Maybe someone is actually just fucking with it.
Yeah, sure.
It's like no one's taking them seriously. It's not going to work because it requires a degree of concentration.
Absolutely.
And like, you know what I mean?
Well, dude, and you know, I'll think this is a pretty good place to leave it because this is something that philosophically I feel very strongly about, right? Like, let's say for the sake of argument that we weren't inhabiting a reality in which expression was a thing, you know? You try and tell people who've never heard music, right? And just the world exists now except there's no music. Well, what do you mean you hear sounds in your head? Don't tell people that. That's crazy. You're an insane person. No, but I hear these sounds. It's like, what the fuck are you? Don't tell other people that. Like, don't lock your ass up.
Well, thanks, buddy. Thanks for the help.
You know what I mean? Right. You'll don't lock your ass up. Don't tell people that. You know what I mean? It's like music would be a malady in some other form of reality where expression wasn't allowed, or you know that would be something that is
insane.
Is crazy. Yeah. Just like the people we spoke about that are maybe schizophrenic. We don't have a way for them to. We can't grapple with what they're dealing with. They don't have a way to necessarily express that to folks that don't deal with it. I believe on some level that music is just like that. It's just that it's pleasurable to people. It's like many things in my life. I'm a huge nerd and dork. It's just about things that people sometimes enjoy. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
No. So yeah,
for sure.
Being crazy makes any of us good artists. Being a little crazy. You can't be so profoundly crazy that you can't go out and interact with the real world. Just ideally you want people to see your art.
Well, I deeply enjoy your craziness.
Hey, likewise, buddy. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Absolutely.
Dude,
Alice, I appreciate the talk. I had a blast. You know, I love bullshitting about whatever nonsense. You know, that's my favorite.
Alice, weird. You can enjoy Conor's craziness as well. July 15th, Holler of Doomfest is in London, Kentucky.
Not to be confused with London, England.
Yeah, don't go to London, England.
No, don't, please don't. It's expensive.
No. And then, and the one was August 28th at Exit Inn, Queens of the Stone Age.
Yes, sir.
We're super stoked about that. Something else right there.
You know, burning witches is a topic I take personally offensive, but I'll forgive you.
Thank you. I don't think the song is actually.
Oh, okay.
Advocating the folks burn witches. I think they're probably quite the opposite if I know anything about their music.
Yeah, that makes more sense if they're not Dark Age Catholics. Okay, gotcha.
I think they are probably the witches in question, to be honest.
Getting burned.
And telling people, so.
Well, Alice, we will see you next week. Bye.